So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Best Day Ever. I'm your only host today. Adam Martin is in Northern Ontario, chasing after some moose. So you guys just have me for the day, but we're going to do our regular show. So I've got the first 24 hours, or the last 24 hours, I should say, where we've got a handful of different news stories I want to cover with you guys. We're going to be chatting about things like Kanye West and his announcement that he'll be buying, it looks like, Parler social media. Again, that's fascinating in and of itself, in my opinion. We've also got a recap on the Public Order Emergency Commission that I want to cover with you guys. We're going to be talking about clarifying confusion over the Pfizer vaccine transmission prevention trials. We talked about that last week as well. Also, if you guys see this video right now, this is my first time trying to actually operate everything by myself without Adam's help. So if you guys can hear and see me, leave me a comment on YouTube, on Rumble, wherever else. It looks like Rumble right now is giving me some troubles, but that seems to be just par for the course for Rumble. So I don't get why Rumble, you have to be so difficult, but we'll roll without Rumble today. But hopefully you guys can see me currently on Twitter, on Facebook, as well as on YouTube. And if you can, let me know in that comment section, because it would just be nice to know that I'm doing this correctly. As well, a couple other stories I want to cover with you guys is Canada's ERs are under intense pressure. No real surprise there. But what are the implications here? And then finally, I also want to touch upon what thought leaders can learn from St. Augustine. So that's going to be it for today's 24-hour news cycle that we're going to cover. Then in addition to that, in the second half of the show, I'm going to be sharing with you guys one of my favorite business-oriented books, particularly if you're a team leader, if you're striving to become a better team leader. It's called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. A Leader's Parable, or Leader's Fable, I think it is, by Patrick Lencioni. Fantastic book. Again, really encourage you guys to check it out. But I'm going to be doing a deep dive and summarizing my lessons and biggest takeaways from that book in the second half of today's show. All right. Well, let's jump into the first half of the show, in which case what I want to highlight here first is Kanye West is apparently going to be buying Parler. So you guys maybe remember Parler, maybe you don't, but it was the social media app that originally, after Donald Trump, I think, was kicked off of Twitter and most other social media apps, he was on Parler for a brief stint. We then essentially saw Parler be deplatformed, not only by the app stores and things of that nature, but I think eventually it ended up actually coming down to even their servers with Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. So this is from Timcast, but there was a few different outlets covering it today. Okay, awesome. It looks like Al's giving me the feedback that everything's working, so I appreciate that, Al. Because it's always hectic your first time streaming by yourself. So from Timcast here, Kanye West to buy social media platform Parler after being censored on Twitter and Instagram. So the press release began by noting that Ye has become the richest black man in history through music and apparel, and is taking a bold stance against his recent censorship from big tech, using his far-reaching talents to further lead the fight to create a truly non-cancelable environment. Oh, and I forgot to turn on my screen share. Let's pull that up for you guys. All right. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. It's interesting, right? We recently saw Truth Social being launched by Donald Trump and his team. I imagine we're going to continue to. We've seen Elon Musk obviously flirting with buying Twitter. Now we see Ye flirting with the idea of acquiring Parler. This to me is only a net benefit. The more platforms out there, the more advocates for free speech, the better, in my opinion. I think last week or 2 weeks ago, we highlighted the interview that Ye did with Tucker Carlson, I want to highlight he recently did another much longer form interview. I think it was 2+ hours with I think it's Revolt, the YouTube channel. Really encourage you guys. I listen to all of it. I always love getting insights into Ye's thinking patterns and his position on things. And longer form interviews really allow him to get deeper into the meat of the subject. So again, if you guys want to go deeper into the mind of Ye, really encourage you to check that out. We also had Zero Hedge here, just highlighting what was going on in regards to Kanye's West purchase and focus on trying to acquire an uncancelable social media app, Parler. So obviously they tried very hard to cancel Parler previously. And I imagine with Kanye acquiring it, we'll see more controversies around it. But we'll see how this all plays out over the course of time, because this will probably take months, if not a year, before we really see this finalized. So, quote here: "This deal will change the world and change the way the world thinks about free speech. Ye is making a groundbreaking move into the free speech media space and will never have to fear being removed from social media again. Once again, Ye provides that, or proves that, he is one step ahead of legacy media narrative. Parliament will be honored to help him achieve his goals." I've never even heard the long form of Parler before. I didn't realize it actually stood for Parliament. Parliament Technology CEO George Farmer said. And now, I don't know if you guys have spent any time kind of dabbling on alternative social media platforms. You know, I've got Gab on my cell phone and check into it every now and then. The biggest challenge with any of these social media platforms, and this includes Truth Social, is really getting that critical mass, right? At what level do you actually start to become the public square? A lot of us will refer to Twitter as the public square in regards to politics, news, finance, and things of those natures. Will we see, whether it be a Parler, a Gab, or a Truth Social, eventually take that crown from Twitter? I don't know. At the same time, can we really see Elon Musk being able to completely reinvent Twitter into a free speech platform? Again, I think this is one of those situations where time will only tell. But these are all net positives, in my opinion. So again, I am looking forward to hopefully a freer technological future and freer social media platforms in the near future. The next story I wanted to highlight here, this is just a quick update. We've talked about the Oakville Trafalgar teacher previously, and we're going to be talking about them just a little bit more, but more details emerge about busty Oakville teacher. If you guys are interested, this is from True North, or True North. Encourage you guys to go check it out if you're so inclined, but just want to highlight a couple of little facts that came out. So a source told True North that Lemieux was a 16-year teacher at the HWDSB and most recently taught at Ancaster High School. So this person has been a teacher for an extended period of time. We covered it last week where a Rebel News reporter decided to take their own attempt at culture jamming by essentially dressing up at a school board meeting, essentially dressed up exactly as Lemieux here. So I don't think that this is the end of the story. I think that we'll continue to see more come out. Obviously, we've had the school board announce that they're going to be looking into it. I think the Ontario Teachers Federation said they were going to look into dressing standards and standards of professionalism and things of that nature. And part of me thinks this could be all a culture jam. Part of me thinks that this is face value and needs to be taken at face value. Either way, as we were discussing last week with Adam, I do find it frustrating that students essentially are the pawn in this game of prosthetic breasts, I guess. I don't even know what to call this Game of Thrones here, but it's a bizarre time in Canadian culture. And one last kind of update story before we jump into the four main stories of the day. Recap of day 2 of the Public Order Emergency Commission's hearing. So there is a lot more information coming out as we're starting to see the testimonies begin on Friday. I imagine we'll continue to see a lot more coverage throughout this week. It's fascinating to me to see how the vast range or the vast spectrum of responses and way people choose to frame this protest, right? Or this occupation, again, depending upon your political slant. One of the witnesses, I wanted to highlight their testimony here. So Zexi Lee, a 22-year-old Ottawa resident and federal government employee, testified that living in Ottawa during the Freedom Convoy was something like living in The Purge, making reference to the horror movie series in which a fictional United States enters a 12-hour state of lawlessness in which rape and murder are legal. Now, it's kind of a bombastic statement, don't you think? Particularly because back in the days of the Maple Pill, I covered with you guys how literally we saw crime in downtown Ottawa decrease. So we literally saw reports of crime decrease dramatically during the protests or during the occupation. And yet we've got a witness here going in front of the commission saying that, yeah, it was pretty much the purge. It was like living through the purge. Uh, Yet there isn't actually really documented violence against citizens of Ottawa. In fact, this individual, when they're giving their testimony, the only the only violence really that they highlighted was actually their fellow residents in her building throwing eggs at the protesters. So that again is kind of fascinating. The only violence described in Lee's testimony today were alleged actions from people living in Lee's apartment building throwing eggs at the truckers from their balconies. Now, again, do I think throwing eggs is a very violent offense that needs to be condemned? It is what it is, right? People are going to react and act out in weird ways and what they perceive as high pressure situations. I think one of the biggest frustrations I have in general about this entire subject matter is how mainstream media and our mainstream politicians, the liberals and Justin Trudeau in particular, decided to frame everyone associated with this as an extremist. And if I was an individual living in downtown Ottawa, if suddenly there was thousands of protesters in my backyard and the news, my prime minister, the powers that be are all telling me that these are extremists and that it's very dangerous for me. And I see the Ottawa mayor and the Ottawa council putting pressure on businesses to essentially close. Yeah, I could understand how someone might find themselves in an echo chamber of fear around this. However, I think had they actually spent a little bit of time and interacted with the protesters, they would have seen what a lot of us saw on social media, or those of you that were boots on the ground at the protest experience, which is, it turns out, this was just a grab bag of Canadians, just like any city or any municipality has. There's going to be good actors, there's going to be bad actors, and there's just going to be a lot of average people involved in such a large movement. And it is unfortunate that I think we're going to see this commission likely very politicized throughout this. I think it's going to be polarized. I fingers crossed that we get a truly fair commission here and we just get an inquiry that gets down to the bottom of things. However, maybe I'm just a little bit too jaded at this moment in time, but it is difficult for me to really believe that that's how things are going to play out. And I'm just quickly checking here. We're still not live on Rumble. Gosh darn it. All right. Well, I'm just going to have to live with that. And those of you that are watching the replay on Rumble, I promise someday we'll definitely get this shit figured out. It frustrates me just as much or more than it frustrates you guys. But that's it for kind of our quick update stories that I want to cover with you guys in regards to what's going on. Let's transition into a couple WTF stories as well. So this one's from the post-millennial. Quebec doctor recommends infanticide under Canada's euthanasia laws. So we've covered this previously. It's so bizarre to me that, eugenics and assisted suicide seem to straddle such a weird political position. Where I think I understand the intentions behind individuals that want to help with medical assistance in dying, right? Or giving people there's another term that's often framed as in regards to uh, I'm drawing a blank here, but essentially, when we're examining Canada's medical assistance in dying, the MAID program, I do have real concerns around it. I do think that individuals likely have good intentions. We've covered it previously. Over 10,000 people, right, were medically assisted in dying. It's one of the leading causes of death now, technically, in Canada, depending on how you choose to categorize deaths. Now, again, obviously, things like cardiovascular events and things like that, like dramatically outweigh the medical assistance and dying. But this isn't a nothing burger, in my opinion, and it's something that we need to be having these difficult conversations sooner than later, or else we're going to find some really weird unintended consequences, in my opinion. So, highlighting from this doctor's position, minors from 14 to 17 years of age, so nearly 18, the committee recommends, and the board of directors support as well, that these minors could, with their tutors or parents, make a request for MAID based on the level of persistent and tolerable suffering that they may experience and become unmanageable and senseless, said Roy. Same for babies from 0 to 1 years of age who are born with severe deformations, very grave and severe medical syndromes whose life expectancy and level of suffering are such that it would make sense to ensure that they do not suffer, given that their probability of surviving is basically nil, he continued. So, again, you know, I believe that a lot of individuals that want to push for this, or the right of death sort of position, the right to end suffering, I'd like to believe that they've got good intentions here. However, I really do think that there's going to be some weird unintended consequences, and we already find ourselves when we're talking about 0 to 1 year olds with severe deformations or medical impairments. Like you're kind of skirting up against or bumping up against eugenics. At what point in time do you decide it's a step too far? Right now, I don't feel clever or smart enough or well informed enough to be able to make those decisions. But I really do think that we need to have intelligent conversations around this subject matter. Um, because if not, we've already experienced so many different slippery slopes over my lifetime. The most recent one being, medical apartheid, right? Vaccine passports here in Canada and lockdowns and all the craziness that followed. And we're even going to get into that later on in today's show. But I think it's important that we understand that just because we start off with one set of intentions doesn't mean that our policies can't morph or evolve into, very drastic different versions of themselves. What I wanted to highlight here in 2021, more than 10,000 people died by euthanasia in the country, reported by AP News. So, again, this isn't like a rounding error, in my opinion. 10,000 Canadians, that's a lot of Canadians. And, maybe every single one of those is a very understandable and justifiable medical assistance in their dying. But we need to err on the side of caution here, I think, personally, when it comes to having doctors assist individuals with their dying. Um, and obviously, there was the story that went viral back in August of this year, the story of an armed forces veteran who sought help for his PTSD and traumatic brain injury made headlines when he was offered aid by Veterans Affairs Canada employee. And again, that's one of those unintended consequences where you've got maybe an employee that they've got certain, questions and responses that they're given, and they can end up directing someone towards a solution that maybe isn't right for them. But a person in a very vulnerable state and a very stressed situation, if they have an expert telling them that they should consider this, it just seems like a dark and bleak future, in my opinion. But again, it's this is a complicated situation that I don't think we're going to solve in one YouTube video, but I just want to highlight these things and at least start these conversations with you guys. So quickly, before we switch gears and get into a couple more WTF stories, I want to highlight a resource with you guys. So this is one of my favorite parts of the show. And so this is from thesovereignbitcoiner.com. Not spelt that way, though, so you're going to have to find the URL. But a reminder, we share all these links now in our Telegram chat. So if you guys haven't joined the Telegram chat, and odds are you haven't, because I think there's only 8 of us there, and I know all of them essentially already, that's where we're sharing all these links to, so all the stories and everything else. Because if you guys don't remember, I previously have gotten uh, uh, YouTube warnings, or YouTube strikes, I guess is what you would call them, because I shared news articles that had bad words in the name of them, even though that news article was actually from the New York Times. So the only way we can safely share our sources now is through Telegram. So if you guys want the sources, make sure you join there. But this is 15 methods to acquire non-KYC Bitcoin. So a reminder, KYC stands for Know Your Customer. So essentially, if you've got KYC crypto or Bitcoin, that means that you've doxed yourself, right? That the government or powers that be or some third party knows who you are and what you've transacted in, and essentially then can start associating other transactions. And, in a perfect world, the reason that we're drawn towards things like Bitcoin and crypto in general is because of decentralization, right? Is because of the idea that we can become financially sovereign individuals. And the best way to do that is to have no one know your business. That's the ideal solution here. So they've got 15 great resources here that I encourage you guys to spend some time, check it out. Even if you're not ready to start throwing your life savings into Bitcoin, I don't blame you. Again, that's probably just an education issue. With time, with learning, if you consistently just commit to learning, I don't know, learning half an hour a week about Bitcoin, I promise you, 100, 200, 300 hours in, you will find yourself with a much different position. And ideally, you'll find yourself in a much different position before the next halving event, which I think right now would be roughly scheduled for May 1st, 2024. So presumably that will set off another crypto or particular Bitcoin hype cycle. So again, right now is a perfect time to be learning about Bitcoin when everyone else is shitting on it because of its volatility. Now, these resources aren't necessarily Canadian oriented, though Canadians can participate in a lot of them. Another one is Bull Bitcoin. So really encourage you guys, if you're a Canadian and want to start getting involved with Bitcoin, if you want to start moving towards non-KYC Bitcoin, Bull Bitcoin could be a great solution for you. So really encourage you guys, spend some time and learn a little bit about these things. One last WTF story I want to share with you guys. This one's just bizarre. I don't even know, like, I don't even have a hot take here. It's just this is telling that these are the times we live in, I guess. So, New York congressional candidate releases sex tape to promote sex positive campaign. So, Mike Itkis advocates decriminalizing prostitution between consenting adults. So, the video titled Bucket List Bonanza features two separate clips of Itkis and adult performer Nicole Sage, who also directed the video engaging in sexual activity. The first clip appears to have been filmed in July 2021, while the second clip reads October 2021. So, this is an interesting political stunt, if nothing else. At face value, I imagine most people are just going to have a chuckle and be like, well, this person isn't a serious politician. I don't know if you can go so far as to say that, though, in this modern era, right? I've spent a little bit of time studying individuals that become famous, individuals that maybe we don't fully understand how they became famous, but one fascinating thing is thinking about Kim Kardashian, right? And the sex tape that was leaked that arguably at least partially launched her to a different stratum of fame, if not launched her into the stratosphere of fame. And yet, a lot of people don't understand that Kim K was actually originally Paris Hilton's assistant. And Paris Hilton similarly had a sex tape essentially go viral. And again, that propelled her arguably into a different level of fame. So while I'm not saying that these were strategic releases by either of these women, it is interesting to see how that plays out and to see kind of that pattern repeat itself from Paris to Kim. Now, I don't think that Mike Itkis is likely going to have the same response here, but I have heard people kind of just jokingly state that by 2040 we're going to have a president or a prime minister that will have a public sex tape, and yeah, that kind of feels like a very plausible thing, and it's just again interesting if nothing else to say here. Now, I would love to hear from you guys. What is your thoughts? What's your opinions on prostitution? Should it be legalized? Should it not be? Obviously, me being kind of a libertarian or an individual with an anarchist bent, consenting adults should essentially be allowed to do whatever they want as long as they're not harming anyone else or making direct immediate threats to anyone else. So this to me, technically, I'm fine with. At the same time, I think it is interesting. And if this is like the biggest part of your campaign, yeah, I'm going to question the validity of your campaign to a certain extent there, because I think, New York has a lot of problems, and, decriminalizing prostitution, I'd be surprised if that's the number one priority for the average New Yorker. But again, I've never even been to New York, so what do I know? You guys let me know in the comments. What's your thoughts? What's your opinions on this story or any of the other stories that we're going to cover here today? Now, jumping into the first main story of the day that I want to discuss with you guys, clarifying confusion over the Pfizer vaccine transmission prevention trials. This is from Joe Warmington. So, a member of conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's shadow cabinet is now calling for an inquiry in the wake of Pfizer's admissions. Now, we discussed this when the story originally broke, right? This relates to the Dutch MP that asked a Pfizer director point blank, essentially, like, did you guys study at all before you released the vaccine, whether it reduced transmission? I said at the time that I found her answer not straightforward and kind of confusing because she talked about immunization rather than transmission. I really wish she would have answered it definitively, because at least like people could build stronger arguments around it. Where again, when it seems like she kind of misanswered the original question, it leads to a lot of wishy-washiness. There feels like there's a lot of room here for them to stretch out of any complaints that individuals might have about this. So Pfizer's admission, they did not do clinical trials to see if their vaccine prevented COVID-19 transmissions, seems like a courtroom-esque gotcha admission. And on the surface, it does feel that way. In the Dutch MP in a social media post, right? We discussed this. He really does frame it that way. However, when you dig deeper into it, it's actually really confusing where like they kind of never claimed this. And a lot of politicians and health officials push that narrative without actually really citing anything. So again, this creates for very murky waters. And then finally, even if you were to listen to like Justin Trudeau and a lot of health officials in Canada, what they'll often say is it was the best tool available to us to fight transmission and or to reduce transmission. And again, even that framing, like, well, I don't, is a tool that's like 0.1% effective still a tool? I mean, I guess kind of technically, right? It'd be like me using this mug as a hammer. I mean, like, I could use it to do some hammer like things, but I couldn't use it in every way. And you wouldn't find a construction worker working full time using this as his primary hammer. And that's kind of where we find ourselves now with the discussions around the vaccines, around the jab. And yeah, I honestly, I think that we're going to get very unsatisfying answers to a lot of the questions that a lot of us that were maybe skeptical throughout this pandemic are very frustrated by the fact that we don't get any point blank answers. There's no, there's not going to be a silver bullet gotcha moment, in my opinion. I think this is all just going to get confusing and bloated, and we're going to hear a lot of hearsay, and there's going to be a lot of like second guessing and armchair quarterbacking. But I honestly don't know if we're ever going to get a definitive resolution to a lot of these very important questions, in my opinion. Because again, the narrative we already see evolving here in Ontario, and I'm going to cover that in a story later on today about, you know, how they're potentially threatening us with masks again. And so when I look at this, I feel like I see the games they're going to play, and these games are going to be very unsatisfying for all sides. And I guess my final point here in my meandering monologue is I hope, if nothing else, this causes people to question the mainstream narrative more. Because there is what essentially happened, in my opinion, is you had these pharmaceutical execs push out a vaccine. You then had the government wanting to look like they had a solution, right? They wanted to show you guys that they had a hammer in their tool belt. So they immediately propped this up on a pedestal. Then we had the media that was just, reveling in the COVID hysteria and how it was helping them out with their ratings and things of that nature. And what you had was like individuals continuing to like hype up or dramatize any sort of talking points to the point where you've got like um, mainstream media, like even the Toronto Star, pushing narratives on their front page about like, should we tolerate the unvaccinated? Well, what exactly are you tolerating about the unvaccinated at this point in time? If essentially we're all willing to admit that like transmission is going to be a thing regardless of whether you got the vaccine, that seems like we've all kind of came to terms that natural immunity is a thing, and depending upon which study and what's your risk factor and all kinds of other things, that maybe natural immunity is just as good or arguably even better than getting the jab, then where are we left with these discussion points, right? And I think that a lot of individuals that really hyped up the vaccines are going to point to the fog of war at the moment in time that they made their statements. They're going to say, hey, it was the best tool still available to us. That's what I said. Sure, it was a terrible hammer, but technically we didn't have any other hammers. So what are you going to do about it? And again, my biggest concern, my biggest threat, I think, to us as a society right now is just how quickly we all capitulated to the argument that better safe than sorry. And when it comes to your individual freedoms, your liberties, your rights, that's the siren call of every dictator, of every tyrant. It's better safe than sorry. Give me the power so I can save you. And there's no messiah figure here that's going to save us. And there's no one politician that's going to save us either, because any politician in Canada worth their salt would have already spoken up, would have already got kicked out of their caucus, right? Would have already been kicked out of their party, because for the last 2 years, that was essentially a no-go zone outside of arguably the PPC party in Canada in federal politics. Again, they don't have a member of parliament, so they never really got the opportunity to show their teeth if they actually did have teeth. So a very unsatisfying answer is where we find ourselves in regards to all discussions around the vaccine. I see Al's in the comments. What do you got to say here, Al? So, yeah, okay, but a tool at what cost? Yeah, and that's the biggest question that we need to be having here. And again, when we talk about the economic impact, when we talk about the impact on a generation of children and their speech development, all these are like really fuzzy things. And you're going to be able to come up with studies that show one extreme and the other extreme. And again, it's going to just result in that very unsatisfying. That's kind of where we are as a society right now. Upon a closer look, I also found Pfizer's president, this is back to the article now, of international developed markets, Janine Small's actual quote unclear. Ruse asked her, was the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? Small, with a chuckle, responded, regarding the question around whether we knew about stopping immunization before it entered the market, no. And then said, we had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market. And from the point of view, we had to do everything at risk. So again, very confusing statement there. What is the speed of science? Could we get a something to clock the speed of science here, because I'm confused. And the fact that so many of these uh, um, pharmaceutical execs, these government officials, these politicians feel like they can just hide behind this paper shield of science, like it's a magical word that just essentially washes their hands of anything, right? Like, I don't know. This is some like Pontius Pilate stuff, it feels like, to a certain extent. On Twitter, Rue said, COVID-19 passports and mandates placed millions of people, this is the politician now, of people outside society, but there was no evidence the vaccine would even stop the transmission. And that to me is why it was so frustrating to see our prime minister constantly frame Canadians as racist, misogynist, as anti-science, as anti-vaccine, when they were really asking, like, you actually should need more than just beyond the benefit of the doubt in regards to completely overthrowing all of our custom and social norms up until this moment in time. And yet we actually had the exact opposite, where long as they even had the hint of a doubt, they were allowed carte blanche in order to go crazy. And I hope never again. I hope we learned our lesson, but I do fear that we will find ourselves in similar positions in the future. And that's why I think having these conversations is important. It's why I think having these conversations with you guys in particular is important. We need to create common knowledge, right? As game theory would dictate that, hey, I know that this isn't okay. You guys know this isn't okay. Turns out there's a lot of us that know this isn't okay. And that's what the Freedom Trucker Convoy protesters really proved to society, in my opinion. Now, again, that was despite every mainstream politician, mainstream news outlet demonizing them. Still, a lot of us saw through the fog of war and understood that this was not okay. It may seem like back to the article now, it may seem like a long scientific answer, but the Pfizer Canada clears up any ambiguity. The company confirmed these trials did not study transmission of COVID-19 after immunization. This is important since Government of Canada's own website states vaccination is one of the most effective ways to protect our families, communities, and ourselves against COVID-19. And so, again, this is where I think we're going to see them just start becoming lawyers with language, where they're going to stretch definitions and meanings. No surprise there. They're already pretty good at it. But they're going to do this to a level that's going to make George Orwell's head spin. 1984 reference here. But in October 6, 2021, press release from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stated, by requiring vaccination from federal public servants, travelers, and employees, the Government of Canada will reduce the risk of COVID-19, prevent future outbreaks, and better protect the health of Canadians. So again, I think that what we're going to see is them just like frame the argument consistently. Not that Justin Trudeau would ever actually answer a point blank question anyways, but when they are faced with these questions, I think we're just going to see them try and dance around the subject matter rather than actually try and get to the bottom of it. And Yeah, that's politics in a nutshell, isn't it? It's just like that they're not actually focused on serving us. They're focused on protecting themselves, protecting their fiefdom, and growing the government bloat so that they can continue to milk our teats as taxpayers. That's how our society essentially works. Switching gears here a little bit, this is from North again. Ontario's top doctor threatens return of mask mandates. And obviously, True North is going to be partisan in their framing of this, but it does feel like a threat these days. This is a direct quote from the Ontario Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore. So 16% is absolutely not acceptable to me, said Moore, alluding to the percentage of Ontarians 70 years or older who have received their fourth dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. So, how do you make this determination of what's acceptable to you? I guess would be one of my questions to Dr. Moore. Secondly, if we're going to go into another seasons of lockdowns and mask mandates and vaccine passports, can you at least give us very clear, definitive goalposts that we can aim for? Because consistently, we saw you guys stretch these definitions again throughout the last 2 years. Why should we believe you at all at this moment in time? What additional evidence has came out to make masks irrefutable? Because it feels like they're pretty refutable in regards to how much of a significant impact they actually have in reducing transmission, particularly when we're looking at asymptomatic individuals, right? So people that don't appear to be sick, that don't appear to have any symptoms. What sort of like smoking gun do you have here for evidence? It just, I don't think that the incremental gain, right, is there. Like, again, for individuals that want to do it, you do you. Wear the mask until the end of time, for all I'm concerned. But to force it on others, right, to force it on Canadians, to restrict our individual rights here, particularly as we continue to see the COVID narrative just kind of dissolve, right? To erode. It's just so frustrating. If there is any significant impact on our health, this is from Dr. Morgan, on our health system where we can't care for Ontarians appropriately, I will absolutely have the conversation with government around whether we have to mandate masking for a set period of time, said Moore. Now, if you believe it's going to be for a set period of time and they're going to stick to their guns if they implement mask mandates again, I'm surprised you're able to navigate day-to-day life, that you don't just get conned out of all your money by Zimbabwe princes that hit you up in your DMs and email notifications. But yeah, this is where we are as a society, and we need to do better. We need to hold these individuals more accountable, in my opinion. Next story here, building upon Ontario, Quebec, and just Canada's health system in general. This is from the CBC News. Canada's ERs are under intense pressure and winter is coming. Now, this isn't untrue, right? Like, this appears to be a fact that our ER is under pressure, but pre-COVID, they were under pressure, right? We've covered it before that we were often at 80, 90, 100% plus capacity in 2018, 2019. You can go back and, go through the Toronto Star or the CBC, whatever your preferred mainstream news outlet is, and you'll see consistently that this is a narrative that just seems to continuously go hand in hand with the public welfare state, right? With public health care in general, is that we're always at max capacity. And a couple things that I find particularly interesting about the way CBC chose to frame this. First of all, in Montreal, for instance, ER hovered at about 150% capacity for much of the past week, and some surpassed 200%. Again, that is concerning. There are going to be consequences to that. But the last 2 years of lockdowns, of vaccine passports, and all the other crazy bureaucracy we saw implemented, of firing of nurses and medical staff that weren't vaccinated or weren't keeping up to date with the dictates of big government, all those things eroded our healthcare system. I don't think that this can squarely be laid just at the feet of COVID or just at the feet of like this upcoming surge that we're going to have this winter. And reminder, we've been talking about this for a while. The idea that just COVID season, like we've got flu season, seems to be the meta now. This is just going to become the new normal. We should just, I think, accept this as reality. The same way that we seem to accept certain things like heart disease and cancer to a certain extent. Again, that doesn't mean we can't try and be proactive, that individuals can't take individual proactive measures to try and put themselves in a better position. Looking at the strain by numbers from the article here, 147%. The ER overcapacity in Montreal on Friday, October 14th. 33 hours was how long ER patients in Ontario had to wait before getting an inpatient bed in August. 4,000, the number of healthcare workers on COVID leave in Quebec on Friday, October 14th. Now, there's a lot of different data points there that we could parse out. We've also talked about how in rural parts of Ontario, we've got ERs closing down for the weekend just because they don't have the staff. Now, do we think making it harder to become a medical professional, do we think having more and more restrictions on them and more requirements is going to result in a more robust workforce or less individuals capable of providing us the solutions we need? Um, one interesting point that I think we're going to see become more and more a talking point in regards to what's going on with Canada's healthcare system is this point here made by an emergency or Carolyn Snyder, the head of emergency medicine at St. Michael's Hospital in downtown Toronto. I've been in emergency medicine for almost 19 years now, and I've never seen the waits that our patients have to endure at all. This is just like we're going to accept it. Our healthcare system is crumbling before our eyes. One of the really interesting points that's made in this article, Morris, head of the province's Emergency Physicians Association, said the lack of staff, resurgence in COVID-19 patients, and backlogs elsewhere in the system are all contributing to overloaded ERs. Again, that's not going away anywhere. But one of the points they made here, as our patients have gotten more complex, as our patients are getting older, we need more and improved care for them when they leave. So like this should be catching our healthcare system off base, like off guard. Did we not understand that baby boomers are getting older? Did we not understand that they're one of the biggest demographic cohorts and shifts that we've ever experienced in society? Like, how did we find ourselves at this moment in time where it just seems like, oh shit, baby boomers are getting older. They're going to stress out our healthcare system more as they get older, and their medical ailments just pile up one after another. Yet here we are completely caught off guard somehow as a society. Like, I find this truly concerning. And I think that you guys should find this truly concerning too, because like we should have proactively tried to fix this stuff. We're not. We're going to continue to just be reactive. And a lot of the reactions we have are going to be demonizing individuals versus actually looking at the systemic issues within our healthcare system. Maxed ERs aren't going away. Medical tourism, I'm willing to bet, almost guarantee, will increase in Canada, where we're going to see Canadians choosing to go to America or Central American countries in order to get elective and even sometimes necessary medical treatments, because they're not going to be willing to bear the length of times that you're going to wait for the Canadian system. However, we're going to continue to see taxes increase here in Canada as well. And we're going to get taxed more. We're going to be demonized more as individuals. And we're probably going to get shittier and shittier service as we see the baby boomers continue to age. Yeah. I don't know. This seems very black pill. I apologize, guys. But I just don't see how we're actually going to solve this solution. I don't think any politician will actually have the guts to enforce the sort of policy changes that we're going to need. It's like, if we actually want to get serious about our medical system, we're going to need some dramatic shifts and changes. And I don't think it's going to be popular with voters, right? Like, they're going to promise us a new dental care system. You haven't even got healthcare under control. What should make us believe that you're going to somehow magically be able to solve dental care for us? You're not. Like, I'm almost willing to predict we're going to see a decrease in quality of service as we see dental care kind of nationalized here in Canada. Maybe I'm just too black-pilled. Maybe this time they'll do it right, even though every other government policy and program seems to just continuously bloat with unnecessary bureaucracy while continuing to demonize its customer base. But I don't know. It's kind of what I expect to see play out here in regards to our medical system and our soon-to-be dental system. The final story I wanted to highlight with you guys, this one's more on a positive note. So, hey, not all black pills today. What thought leaders can learn from St. Augustine? So obviously, St. Augustine, a philosopher often referenced throughout Western society. And I just thought this was a great reminder here and something that all of us could use. So this is from Fee Stories, and reminder, links to all of these stories that I'm referencing are in the Telegram chat. Reed pointed out that Enlightenment seekers are drawn to teachers who manifest mastery, and mastery is an outgrowth of dedication to self-enlightenment. Reed cited St. Augustine as an example. St. Augustine is a case in point. Deeply contemplative and introspective, he experienced insights and understandings far surpassing those of most people. Bent on his own improvement, the expansion of his own consciousness, he became a master of exposition. That is, he learned to explain the truth which came into his possession. In numerous writings, among them his confessions, he made available to others that which he had first made his own. Today, more than 15 centuries later, this is among the most widely purchased of all autobiographies. Here we observe the power of attraction extending itself remarkably in time. The best thing you can do to aid in the enlightenment of others is to first and foremost tend to your own light. Seek improvement in your own understanding through study and reflection, and share your understanding with others primarily for the sake of further improving your own understanding by formulating and testing it, not for the sake of fixing theirs. And I find that to be a very powerful statement, right? Maybe you've heard, put on your oxygen mask before putting on your neighbor's, or clear the log out of your eye before telling your neighbor about the speck in their eye. There's a lot of, euphemisms, analogies that are made in regards to understanding this point. But at least for myself, I find I need a constant reminder, because there's a lot of things that are under our personal control that we can directly influence. And it's much better that we focus on what we can control and what we can influence. So while me frothing at the mouth and being frustrated about the way our society is organized or the way politicians choose to operate our government, may not be necessarily the most productive, by trying to have a conversation with you guys, I am trying to explore these things, and it forces me to think about these conversations, to study these subject matters in a greater level of detail than I would if I just simply read the headline and got mad, right? It'd be very easy for me just to read some of the headlines that we had today and just purely want to froth at the mouth. Like, Canada's ERs are under intense pressure and winter is coming. Yeah, what's fucking different than every other year that I've been alive? Not really much. This is just more of the same old, same old. This is all bullshit. Da, 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 da. Matt goes down a dark pill or black pill moment there. But there are things that we can control, right? So we can be proactive in trying to position ourselves to maybe not require health or medical interventions to the same extent as the average citizen, by trying to stay in shape, right? By being a little bit more active than we are today. And this is something that, again, regardless of where you're starting, so whether you're, at 10% body fat and you're just trying to get to 8 or 6%, or whether, you haven't left the house in a month, both of those individuals can make concrete steps to better position themselves for a better future. And that's something I need constant reminder of as well. Just this weekend, actually, Dan and Adam and I were chatting in one of our Twitter spaces, and Adam brought up an old YouTube video of mine, The Dark Side of Financial Independence. And, it's a fascinating series, in my opinion, at least. But again, it's self-centered and self-focused. So no doubt, or no wonder I find it interesting. But where I'm kind of exploring my first world problems, some of my struggles against them. And, when I look back on, I made those videos in 2016, 2017, 2018. I think I even made one in like 2021. It is an interesting insight. And one of the reoccurring themes I remind myself in those videos of, and I'm constantly reminded when I rewatch it, is like, yeah, I need to focus on what I can control, right? The world is a very confusing place out there. I don't think it's ever not going to be confusing, but choosing how you navigate it and how you decide to interact with the world really dictates what you get out of the world. So uh, I guess what I'm really trying to make here as a point is, you know, regardless of where you're at, focus on what's under your control. So if right now, inflation is just destroying you and your family budget, okay, can you cut out eating out, right? Can you start focusing on buying staple foods rather than prepared meals, right? Can you to cook in batches, right? To try and position yourself to make the decision making easier, right? One of the ways a lot of us set ourselves up for failure is by lacking a plan. Any plan is better than no plan. So again, even if tomorrow I'm going to get up, I'm going to do 100 push-ups. Maybe you get up tomorrow and you only do 10 or you only do 20 push-ups. But hey, that's still 10 or 20 more than you would have done without that plan. Now, for myself, I really find that I've got different levels or tiers of agreements I make with myself. And there's a certain level of agreement where like it's unbreakable. But I know in order to make that agreement or deal with myself, I need to really be bought in to that concept, that idea, that new habit I'm trying to form, whatever the case may be. And so oftentimes I'll first personally like flirt with that concept or idea. So again, I'm no longer vegan, but for an extended period of my life, 40 months, I was vegan. But before I became vegan, I was like, weekday vegan or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday vegan, and just kind of experimenting and toying with that. Once I developed a certain level of experience and understanding and started to figure out like, oh, I could meal plan an entire week or tier, and there are solutions, and I can, make sure I'm still getting the nutrients that I should get or whatever, or at least as good or better nutrients than I was pre-vegan. That allowed me to then make that sort of serious commitment with myself where I knew I wasn't going to break it for those 40 months. And I think a lot of us just don't spend enough time like thinking about planning and doing the actual planning. A lot of people, I think, wake up Monday morning and decide, ooh, I should have some good intentions for today, rather than planning the night before. The easiest way I've ever found to put myself in a position for success is to be premeditated, is to have thought ahead, is to have tried to have think what's the sequence of steps I need in order to get to my desired objective. And if you're simply like, well, I need to get in better shape, okay, that's a stepping stone, but we need to get more specific in that regards. And so that's kind of what I want to share here with you guys in regards to this Fee Stories article around St. Augustine. Because there is a lot of things under our control. And if we want to make the world a better place, we should first focus on making ourselves better people. Because I really do think we lead by example. For myself, I believe that the content I made about personal finance and lean fire, financial independence, retiring early, I really do believe, and I've got the feedback from you guys, that I've made a serious impact in a lot of people's lives. But I think had I not been living that way, had I not been committed to it, that there's a really good chance that not nearly as many people would have bought into that story. And so by me constantly exploring, what is enough? Is lean fire enough? Is $2,000 a month? Is $10,000 a month? Where does happiness, where can I achieve optimal happiness? And it turns out, for me, at least personally, I don't need a lot of money. I really just need to know that I've got like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those bottom couple tiers, the physiological, right? That I've got my food, I've got my shelter, that all those basic necessities are covered. That's it. And then the next thing becomes really trying to find personal enlightenment, personal satisfaction, or self-actualization. And that is a much more nuanced journey, in my opinion, rather than the financially independent or getting to a certain health level or whatever the case may be. But for all of us, just understand life's a journey, enjoy the journey and the process. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video of me being solo here on the last 24 hours. Again, Adam will be back next week. So if you guys didn't enjoy this so much, we'll get back to more banter in future episodes. And I'm realizing me by myself, I actually need a couple extra articles in order to round out this entire hour. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Appreciate those of you that smash the like buttons. Those of you that have subscribed to our Substack as well as our Telegram chat. I really appreciate that. So here's a quick little highlight. Again, this is what I'll be sharing throughout this week. All the links to all the different stories we covered today. So really encourage you guys get into the Telegram group if you're not. Link in the video description down below. As well, join the Substack where I'll be going over with you in the second half of today's show everything around the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Really fantastic audiobook. It's very short as well, so there's almost no excuses for not consuming it. Oftentimes, I've got a tendency towards consuming long form content and, thick books, right? So like, I think of, actually, I don't even know, but like the Lucifer Effect, I think is over 30 hours. But when we're looking at the 5 dysfunctions of a team, it's, I think, 4 hours or under 4.5 hours. So there are so many lessons that you can take away from the parables laid down in that book that I strongly encourage you guys to do that. But let's go into our little intermission break here, and I'll be back talking about the 5 dysfunctions of a team in a second.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day say life is like a record, so just let it play. Educate, motivate, entertain and demonstrate. Health, wealth, relationships and legacy we elevate. Every day is what you make it, so don't take it and waste it. Never too late to save it. Remember, roses grow from pavement. Let me break this down in layman's. Just wanna live outrageous. Build my way to greatness. Gotta speak my truth and face it. Hear the basis lies. Gotta challenge it and break it. Take a shot of truth. Chase it with some motivation. The best day ever. The best day ever. We gon' squad up. Have the best day together. Best day ever. Best day ever. We gon' squad up. Go harder than any weather. What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die, cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die, cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play. Best Day Ever Media. Song by Dan the Lost Boy.
All right, we are back. We're going to be talking about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. I still haven't figured out Rumble, so I'm going to have to figure out that dysfunction another day. But a reminder, you guys can get this article as well as all the other articles we've talked about in the second half of our shows completely free on Substack. If you've never used Substack before, it sometimes can be intimidating because it'll be like, subscribe. You can literally click a button and just get around subscribing if you're scared of giving me and Adam your email address. So there really should be no excuse. But if you want to get an email every single day, give us that email. Well, every single weekday, I should say, because we're happy to put together this content. And for me, the second half of these best day evers is really just about going deep on random subject matters. So a lot of us stumble into neat ideas, neat pieces of content, neat opportunities, all these things. And sometimes we just don't really have a platform to explore them, right? Or like, when are you like, can you just naturally segue into a conversation with your friends about a great leadership book that you read? Maybe, depending upon your peer group. But for a lot of us, we don't necessarily get to explore these ideas or concepts. And so for me, that's what's, the second half of this show, Best Day Ever, is all about, is being able to go into those deep dives. Because while it's useful, in my opinion, to kind of go over the 24-hour news cycle, right? Highlight some of the stories, explore them, share my and Adam's opinions, as well as get your guys' opinions on them. I also want to go deeper into certain subject matters because, like that St. Augustine quote, I'm constantly focused on trying to make a better version of Matt McKeever. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm always going to be a work in progress. I regularly struggle with a lot of things, just like a lot of people struggle with a lot of things. We're all human, but there's no reason why we can't be using ourselves as a benchmark or playing golf against ourselves, right? And trying to always get better. So with that in mind, let's pull up our Substack. I'm going to jump into this fantastic leadership book. I was trying to remember who originally put me on to Patrick Lencioni, because he's written an actual entire series of books. But let's jump into this article I put together for you guys on my favorite of his books. My second favorite book of his would be the Five Temptations of a CEO. I think those two books together, whether you're an old hat when it comes to being a leader, and whether that's as a CEO or just like a functional team leader or department leader, or whether you're just aspiring to become a leader, these books honestly changed my entire perspective when it comes to being a leader. Most of us, I think, when it comes to leadership, right? Like, maybe you're exposed to some great leaders through YouTube videos or, sports figures and things of that nature. But the vast majority of us only can really mimic what we personally experience, right? And if you just my personal experience being an accountant and then working in public accounting and things of that nature, accountants aren't natural born leaders. In fact, I don't think a lot of us are natural born leaders, but we can purposely become better leaders. And honestly, I never really experienced great leadership until I quit the corporate world and started working for myself and started meeting fellow entrepreneurs that were actively thinking about this, right? When I was working for the public accounting firm, uh, BDO, essentially like we do things like team building and workshops, but like it was always like a rubber stamp that one of the partners had decided, like maybe their friend was a consultant and had this team building workshop, and they'd be like, yeah, sure, we'll pay you like 5 grand, come in here, we'll do a drum circle or whatever. But it wasn't actually about trying to really build better teams and empower your team members. Whereas once I started exploring these books, particularly from Patrick Lencioni, I started to really understand. So in the second half of this discussion, I'm going to get into some of the direct lessons and takeaways that I've implemented in my businesses. Now, again, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal here as some great entrepreneur. Um, you know, Referencing back to that third Dark Side of Financial Independence video I shot way back in the day, honestly, like my entire history is just a history of failing forward. So I constantly stumble, I constantly make missteps. I'm constantly wrestling with myself through the lens of hindsight, because I know that I'm capable of so much more, and it frustrates me to no end that I rarely live up to the high standards I set for myself. However, that being said, continuous improvement, right? That's how we're going to build the best day ever. So I want to start off this conversation about the book around a couple of quotes. So first one from Michael Jordan here: talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence wins championships. And again, there's that classic saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with a team. Napoleon Hill: it is literally true that you can succeed best and quickest by helping others to succeed. I really do think that that's how some of the best leaders are able to tap into their teams and get the most out of them, is by actually being focused on being more of a coach rather than just someone barking from the front or barking from the back, for that matter. Um, Final quote from Patrick Lencioni: not finance, not strategy, not technology. It is teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage, both because it is so powerful and so rare. That last point's key there. Is honestly, real teamwork is extremely rare. And one of the things I struggled with in several of my businesses is, as far as employees go, we would use my social media as a natural funnel to try and get, the most talented, the most motivated individuals to join businesses like my wholesaling team, right? Now, with that, one thing that I struggled with at the start, and I still struggled till the day that I handed off the business, was trying to get these highly motivated individualists to be in alignment in a team setting. Because a lot of these guys consider themselves like, the killer salesmen, right? They're all focused on being the alpha. And yet you're trying to get them all to pull together, right? To work together as a team, to have that mentality of iron sharpens iron. Whereas a lot of like salespeople really struggle with the understanding of wanting to play on a team, because it's like, hey, if I spend time helping him become better, he's either going to steal deals from me, or I'm just losing out on time that I could be spending getting deals myself. And so we tried playing around with a bunch of different like incentive models and structures and things like that. But I really found that if I wasn't trying to build a strong team culture, if I wasn't, constantly leading by example, that it was all for naught. That I was literally just pissing into the wind at that moment in time. Um, so a question I want to leave you guys with is: have you ever been part of a high functioning team? Have you been on an underperforming team? I suspect that all of us have been on underperforming teams. But I'm willing to bet that a decent number of individuals have never actually been on a high functioning, successful team. And it's really sad, because we can accomplish so much more together when we're able to tap into each other's strengths and pull together. There's that classic saying about Clydesdale horses. I don't remember the exact facts, but let's say a Clydesdale horse by himself can pull 8,000 pounds, but two Clydesdale horses can pull 20,000 pounds. And again, just understanding that, like, we can become more than the sum of our parts. But the only way we do that is through great leadership and great teamwork. So this leadership fable is all about teams and how to bring a dysfunctional group together. Patrick Lencioni creates a fictional story about a struggling team, but the archetypes of team members laid out will be familiar to everyone. Being an effective team leader is not something that comes natural to most of us. It certainly doesn't come natural to me. And if it doesn't come natural to you, don't panic, because that doesn't mean you're destined to be a terrible leader or you can never level up into being a great leader. when I originally was told about this book, I'll be honest, I had some hesitations about consuming it because I was like, oh, like it's a fable, right? So like he's making up stories and they're going to be like overly simplistic, moralistic stories, right? Like, think of the classic fables from history, right? Tortoise and the hare, where you're like, okay, but like this doesn't really apply to real life. No, honestly, the archetypes he creates in this fable I found to be so accurate based upon my time spent in the corporate world. And again, maybe the names are a little bit different, maybe their positions are a little bit different, but again, he hits upon very key archetypes here. So, one archetype that I came across constantly in the pharmaceutical industry was in regards to our sales and marketing teams. And those individuals believe in the essentially they walked on water, that they were the lifeblood of the business, that you need to get out of their way and essentially just do whatever they want to do. And while what we would see is sometimes these high performers for sprints of periods of time would overachieve, crush their goals and targets, it was really easy for them to fall off. And I think one of the reasons it was easy for them to fall off was if they weren't holding themselves accountable, no one else was. And there wasn't this sense of working together. So again, like just do yourself a favor. Whether you're currently in a leadership role or someday you dream of being one, like go consume this book, spend the 4 hours to listen to it, because I'm not going to do it enough justice here. But the archetypes that he lays out, I've literally met every single one of those people in real life. Like it was spooky. And maybe just the pharmaceutical industry was designed exactly like high tech startups, because that's the example that he uses in this book, is around a team of individuals with a new CEO and the dysfunctions that come with that, right? That's one of the hardest parts, is when you're an outsider coming into a new team and you have to lead them, is it can be really easy for people to on the existing team to discount any value you can bring to it. She doesn't have the experience. She's never worked in this industry before. She doesn't even know us. She doesn't understand our inner functions or our team dynamics. She doesn't get the culture. And yeah, a lot of bad leaders will make those mistakes, but a good leader, as is kind of laid out in this example, will take the time to try and really understand. And one of the biggest lessons I personally took away from this was the idea of like a culture reset. And that's really what the main character here explores coming in as a new CEO to a corporation. Is she decides that she needs to completely build from the ground up. And I think for a lot of people, when they get into a leadership role, especially a new leadership role, it's easy to think that you need to be very reactive, just focus on a goal and push the team towards hitting like the metrics, right? But if you don't take a first principles approach to it, if we're not willing to really invest some time and energy into understanding the team dynamics, trying to improve them and get everyone in alignment, you're going to find yourself constantly coming against friction from your team members. They're not going to be heading in the right direction. Everyone's going to be individualistic and looking out just for themselves. So quickly wanted to highlight a few of the books that Patrick Lencioni has written before. So The Five Temptations of a CEO, another great one I recommend. The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, that's this book here. Death by Meeting, a leadership fable, another great one here about solving the most painful problem in business. The Five Dysfunctions of a Team is a quick read at under 4 hours and is a must read for any existing aspiring team leaders. So this graphic actually does a fantastic job of laying out the five dysfunctions of a team. So these are them here in the pyramid, and we kind of go in reverse order. So start at the bottom. So an absence of trust, a fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and an inattention to result. And your role as a leader in regards to absence of trust is you need to set the standard, right? Is it more about saving face and covering your own ass, or are you willing to have the tough conversations? Are you willing to build trust through honesty? And if you are, then you need to go first as a leader. Next, fear of conflict. We need to mind conflict as leaders and understand that conflict's good, right? That idea of iron sharpens iron. That if we can actually be constructive in our criticisms, if we can actually explore complex and nuanced conversations, we can actually get to the bottom of what the real problems are. Versus, again, a fear of conflict. Well, I don't want to say something about them because they might attack me in my department. And again, I saw this play out so often where you get these weird, I'm going to call them unholy alliances between departments where sales and marketing are both not hitting their targets, but they decide to throw finance under the bus, or they decide to throw, whatever, fulfillment and logistics under the bus. And again, that's not actually focus on solving the underlying problems. Way too often we find ourselves trying to treat symptoms rather than the underlying cause of the issues. And, that's the case literally with pharmaceuticals. That's the case in any industry. Lack of commitment. So we need to force clarity and closure. So again, you can have open conversations. You should be able to have tough conversations with your team. But at the end of the day, we need to be very clear and concise in regards to what it is we're trying to accomplish. Far too often, and I've definitely made this mistake time and time again as leader, is taking the approach of, let's do better. Let's work harder. Let's make more money. Well, does that really create any sort of clarity, or does that close the loop on any existing unclosed loops? No, it honestly just muddies the water. It maybe sounds nice in the moment, but it's not actually going to drive any sort of results. Next is the avoidance of accountability. So we need to confront difficult issues, and we need to be proactive in accountability. So again, you know, there's that classic saying in management, like measure what matters, and what's measured matters. And the whole idea there is that if you're not measuring it, if there's not a cadence of accountability, as we talked about in a previous Monday video where we were going over the 4 disciplines of execution. And again, I'm trying to take the best business books I've ever experienced and share them with you guys through these Mondays, because I know how life-changing they were for me. And I understand I'm still not a fantastic leader. I still make mistakes all the time. I still struggle with my businesses and entrepreneurship endeavors. However, imagine how much worse it would be if I hadn't spent the time investing in myself, trying to learn these hard lessons and be proactive. The final dysfunction of a team here is inattention to results. And so we need to, as leaders, focus on collective outcomes. So not just did this individual hit their individual metrics, but are they also helping push us towards, are they compelling us towards our collective goals? So the model starts at the bottom and you work your way up the top. So absence of trust. So a team must feel safe to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is where you're going to, if you can get people to feel safe, to feel trusted, to feel heard, that's when they're going to be willing to open themselves up and be vulnerable. And that's when you can really make real differences and changes versus people just telling you what they think you want to hear. Vulnerability builds trust. So again, as a leader, owning up to maybe you don't have all the answers, to owning up that maybe there's macro environmental issues that are causing your business to struggle. That will still build a culture of trust in your organization if you're willing to tell it like it is. One person can destroy an entire team's trust. So this is also important. You can have 1 or 2 toxic personalities completely co-opt your message, completely drive your team off course. And so again, as a leader, we need to be willing to have conflict. So fear of conflict. Fake harmony stifles productive conflict and ideological differences. So it's much better to put the conflict out in the open and get to the bottom of it. That's how we can actually get people bought in and have commitment, is if we're willing to actually explore pushback, right? Are you willing to have those difficult conversations? No productive conflict means there is no trust. So again, these all build upon each other. So if you don't have any trust in your organization, you're only going to have fake harmony, because people aren't going to be willing to have real conflict. They're not going to push back on their peers. They're not going to push back on you. Now, again, this doesn't mean that just you allow someone to be like, this is bullshit, this is impossible, da, da, da. But if they've got real facts, you need to be willing to explore them. If you set a deadline and they're like, look, there's only 24 hours in a day, it takes us this long in a production cycle, you're asking us to, turn over this level, it's just physically impossible given the resources we have. Now, if you've got that fear of conflict in your organization, that individual is just going to be like, yep, they're just going to overpromise and underdeliver and hope that the consequences aren't that significant, or that they can pass the blame when the consequences come home to roost. Lack of commitment. Lack of commitment and fear of being wrong leads to no decisions or half decisions. This is honestly one of my biggest failures as a leader, is half decisions, where you half commit to something. And your team can sense that in you, right? They can sense if you're not all bought in on the mission. They can sense if you're half-assing it. And why would you expect your team to full-ass it if they sense that their leader's half-assed or half-bought into it? So again, lack of commitment. And if you don't have your trust, right? If you don't have an open conflict, right? If your team's not willing to be in open conflict in order to get to a real commitment, again, you're going to struggle as a team. You're going to miss massive opportunities. The best teams, the best organizations will either have intuitively figured this out or they will proactively figured this out. People don't stick to decisions they've made. I think I actually wrote that wrong there. People don't stick to decisions they haven't made. So again, if you're not getting buy-in from your team, if they don't feel like they're allowed to push back on that goal, they will half-heartedly commit to that goal because they were never bought in. They didn't make the decision. You made the decision for them. Avoidance of accountability. So we would prefer to be nice than hold others accountable for their behavior. And I'm guilty of this. And honestly, it's a disservice to everyone in your organization, not even just the individual team member that you're being nice to avoid that cadence of accountability, but it sets a bad precedent for the rest of the team. All of a sudden, people are going to be more comfortable trying to place blame with each other versus looking inside and trying to focus on what is under my control. What could I actually do to put myself, to put my team, to put my business in a better position to succeed? Then finally, the inattention to results. So desire for individual credit rather than collective success. So win as a team. There should be no other option. Win as a team. You need that collective success. Now, this is a really handy, essentially cheat sheet from this book that I find just so helpful. So if we're looking at a dysfunctional team, let's highlight some of the mistakes we're going to see in regards to an absence of trust. So they're going to conceal weakness and mistakes. So again, they're not going to trust each other to be open and honest. Hesitate to ask for help or offer constructive criticism. So again, no trust, no willingness to try and help each other because I can't trust you to reciprocate because we don't have that sort of culture here. Hold grudges, right? If there's an absence of trust, it's really easy for people to miscommunicate, misunderstand each other, and that's going to bleed into a toxic culture and a culture of grudges. Then dread meetings. So again, if we don't trust each other, if I don't trust that you've honestly got my best interest and this organization's best interest at heart, we're all going to dread the meetings because nothing's actually going to get accomplished in them because we're all just going to be mouthing along to something we don't really believe in. And then find reasons to avoid spending time together. So if you don't like your team members, if you actively dislike them, right? If going to meetings, if interacting with these individuals is the worst thing you could imagine, you're not going to be able to save this organization. Another great book, Bluefish, from I believe it's either Mike Sims or Steve Sims, the author. He talks about the chug test, and him and his wife were talking about their financial advisor and accountant and how it just didn't feel right. And finally, his wife asked him just point blank a question: would you be willing to chug a beer with him down at the pub? And her reason for asking that question was, well, if we don't like him enough, then we're not willing to like hang out with him for a single drink. What makes us think that we're going to be willing to have weird, hard, embarrassing questions with him? And it's a very, very simple and a very poignant point, in my opinion. If you're not willing to spend time with your team members, you're destined, that team is destined for failure. Now, a healthy team would be a trusting team. They're willing to admit weaknesses and mistake, right? They'll take ownership. They'll ask for help. They'll accept questions and input about their areas of responsibilities. So again, because there's a trusting environment, they're willing to trust that you're not trying to make them look bad, but you're actually trying to improve the business, right? You're trying to improve their department by exploring difficult ideas or whenever you decide to make suggestions or try and give help or feedback. They'll give the benefit of the doubt. So again, they're willing to trust that you've got the best of intentions here. And that goes a long way when you're working together on a team. Focus on results, not politics. And this, I've never been in a workplace where politics didn't play a factor. But I have been in workplaces where politics were the primary factor. And I've been in workplaces where politics were, a much lower priority oriented aspect of the business and team. In addition, offer and accept apologies without hesitation. So they're willing to own up and admit when they're wrong because they trust that you'll do the same when you find yourself in their position. And they look forward to meetings and other opportunities to work together. So again, if all the dogs are pulling the sleigh in the same direction, you're going to go a lot further faster than if everyone's trying to go their own way. Fear of conflict. Team meetings are boring. Back-channel politics and personal attacks are permitted. Ignore controversial topics and waste time posturing and managing personal risk. a healthy conflict, have lively, interesting meetings, extract and exploit the ideals of all team members, solve real problems quickly, minimize politics, and put critical topics on the table for discussion. So, again, we should understand that if someone's having a difficult conversation with us, that shows a level of trust. And we should reciprocate that level of trust by really focusing on the subject matter and not taking things personally, right? Be willing to have those difficult conversations, because on the other end of it, you're going to be a better team, more cohesive team. And if people feel that they can actually like speak out and, say the difficult things out loud, they're going to take ownership when you guys finally come to a consensus and come to a decision. And that really leads into this next point here: failure to commit. So, failure to commit creates ambiguity among the team about direction and priorities. Watches windows of opportunity close due to excessive analysis and unnecessary delay. Um, it breeds a lack of confidence and fear of failure, revisits discussions and decisions again and again, and encourages second guessing among team members. So, again, if you're like, yeah, we're going to do this for now because it's the best thing available to us, but maybe something better will come along eventually, who's going to buy into that, right? Like, who's going to be willing to, put in the extra hours to show up to the office early? Who's going to be willing to go the extra mile if they don't believe that the leader and the rest of the team is bought into the same goal? Now, if you've got strong commitments, your team will create clarity around directions and priorities. So you can get really specific, like we talked about in the previous book from Monday, The Four Disciplines of Execution. Um, it aligns the entire team around common objectives. Again, it's fun to celebrate the wins as a team. Whereas if everything's viewed through the individual lens, I, as the one salesperson, I either win or lose solely based upon myself and not the input of my fellow team members. Again, why are people going to be strongly committed? Develops an ability to learn from mistakes, takes advantage of opportunities before competitors do. So, again, you can move faster if you're willing to make strong commitments. Moves forward without hesitation. Honestly, you're the more time you add to a decision, the less likely you are to be committed to it, in my opinion. It is so easy to get off target, off on a tangent, if you're not just making hard and fast decisions. Again, the way to make those hard and fast decisions is to have the team trust each other, is to actually have the team be willing to push back and provide any feedback on what that decision is. And then finally, we can all come together because we all participate in the decision making process in an open and honest manner. It's so much easier for those team members to buy in and move forward. And then finally, changes direction without hesitation or guilt. So, again, if you've got to pivot, be clear and open and honest about it, and your team will buy into it much easier, and you'll have a much better time making that hard decision, making that hard pivot. Next, avoiding accountability. So, creates resentment among team members who have different standards of performance, encourages mediocrity. And again, that's a huge one, right? Where people are just like, I'm just going to stay in the middle of the pack. And as long as I'm not the worst performer, there's going to be no consequences. It's also a lot easier to miss deadlines if there's no accountability. Places an undue burden on the team leader as the sole source of discipline. Now, effective accountability ensures that poor performers feel pressure to improve, identifies potential problems quickly by questioning one another's approaches without hesitation, establishes respect among team members who are held to the same high standards, and avoids excessive bureaucracy around performance management and corrosive action. So, again, accountability is key. If you guys struggle with accountability, circle back to that book, The Four Disciplines of Execution, because that cadence of accountability when it comes to your team meetings is it's such a clear way to make sure that you're all in alignment, right? That you're all bought in. And then finally, the last dysfunction of the team, not focused on results. So, stagnant or fail to grow. Rarely defeats competitors, loses achievement oriented employees, encourages team members to focus on their own careers and individual goals, and you're easily distracted if you're not focused on results. Where collective results retains achievement oriented employees, minimizes individualistic behavior, enjoys success, and suffers failures acutely. And one quote I've always remembered is, you know, um, success shared is doubled and failure shared is halved. And it's one of those little idioms that's really easy to listen and kind of nod along your head to. But again, with a team, if you're sharing the blame, it doesn't feel so daunting to be able to go back and fix things. Where if it's all one person's fault and everyone's just jumping on and dumping on that person, it's really easy for individuals to be like, fine, fuck it. I'm just going to focus on my career. I'm just going to pad my resume so I can move on to the next job. And again, we start to see people drift towards those individualistic tendencies. Whereas if we all celebrate the wins together, if we all come together as a team when we win, it's so much easier to be bought in and trust those individuals that we're all moving together in the same direction. And then benefit from individuals who subjugate their own goals, interests for the goal of the team, and avoids distractions. So again, this is a quick read, a quick listen of a book, but there's just so many great examples, and the storytelling in it is what I think will really allow you, guys listening to this or watching the replay, to buy into this concept. So again, if you're struggling with your team, if there's certain aspects that just aren't clicking, take some time, invest into yourself and your team by doing the homework, by reading books like this book from Patrick Lencioni, by being willing to do a culture reset, right? By being willing to lead from the front and focus on creating a higher trust environment, on being willing to have the right type of conflict in your organization, by committing hard and clearly and specifically when it comes to commitments, no half-assing it. And then, have accountability. If someone's not living up to their commitment, we need to hold them accountable to that. And again, there's productive ways to do this and there's unproductive ways. And I think the examples in this book are very illustrative on what a good leader can do to put themselves in the best position to lead their team. And then finally, inattention to results. At the end of the day, results matter. That was one of the core values of my impact team, was results matter. And again, the reason that was so important for us to understand was, we can be high trust, we can be willing to have hard conflicts, we can make commitments, we can try and hold each other accountable. But at the end of the day, if we're not actually measuring and judging our success based upon those measurements, right, those results that we're driving, it's kind of all for naught. So again, love this book. Love a lot of the books that I've consumed from Patrick Lencioni. I'd love to hear from you guys as well. What are some of your favorite business books? I've consumed a lot over the years. I think another one that we'll likely do in the near future will be 0 to 1. That one's a much different of approach. There's also, I'm drawing a blank here. There's another great book too from the CEO of, starts with a Z, the shoe company. Anyways, there's so many great books on business. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. I also love Ben Horowitz's. He's got 2 books, very focused on culture when it comes to a business. If you're looking to really scale a large business, like focusing on the culture is so key. I think you can have a small team and hold it together just by sheer personality and sheer force. But if you really want to build something scalable, if you want to build something for the long term, focusing on the culture is absolutely key. And having a culture of teamwork is absolutely key, in my opinion. It's the reason why I want to share this book from Patrick Lencioni with you guys. If you guys do ever go back and read some of these books, leave us a comment on our Substack because I would really appreciate it. So again, we open up right now. All our comments is for free. So again, you don't have to pay to comment here. You don't have to pay to be a part of the Substack. But go over, leave us your thoughts, your opinions. If you guys actually do go and consume some of these books, I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear what other business books are you guys currently consuming. I see Al is in the comments here sharing a book he's currently going through. The Art of Passing the Buck by Charles Arthur is a great business book. I've never heard it, so I'll make a little note here right now about The Art of Passing the Buck. Again, that feels like it's got a lot to do with accountability and probably viewing things through your personal lens of like, how can I do better? And that's absolutely a key element or a key ingredient into Best Day Ever, which is what this show is all about. So again, appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Smash the like button, hit subscribe if you're currently watching this on any social media platform. We'll be back tomorrow and we'll cover another set of news stories in the last 24 hours. Then I'm going to be doing a deep dive into personal development. And spoiler alert, I think we're going to talk about the imposter syndrome. It's something that all of us struggle with, and yet I honestly think for a lot of people, the idea of the imposter syndrome is still an idea or concept they haven't been exposed to. And once you start to understand that no one's perfect, that everyone to a certain extent is faking it until they make it, or a better way than faking it is everyone's going through the motions before they get the success, right? That you have to commit to the process, you have to commit to the journey before you can actually get to the destination. So that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Appreciate you guys. Love our Best Day Ever family, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. And I don't have this set up right. Here we go.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever?